Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds for sharing and learning from one another. It's a vibe. ReadswithRosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, taking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. And rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out.
Welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. On today's show, we have Amy Maslin Miller, a biologist and current PhD student at the University of Auckland. She is also behind the well-known Instagram account, Samoan Scientist. Welcome to the show, Amy. How are you?
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for having me.
Man, it's so good to have you here. I know you're busy. I know we've been trying to schedule this, but I'm so grateful, to have you on the show. I was wondering if we could begin with a brief introduction. I have a lot of notes. Like, I've done so much research on you. I've read a lot of articles. But who are you, Amy? Who is Amy Maslin Miller? I mean, who is the Samoan Scientist?
Cool. So my name is Amy Maslin Miller. I am a New Zealand-born Samoan. I'm currently living in Auckland, New Zealand, and in Auckland, I'm like West Auckland, so in rural area. From birth, I was adopted into a Kiwi family, and I was raised by my mum, who's a hairdresser, my nana, who is a retired taxi driver, and she's actually 90, so she's, yeah. And my dad, who is a cabinet maker. I've grown up in Auckland all my life, and initially when I started out, that's all I really knew, the New Zealand culture. But I think, just growing up and wanting to more know about yourself, I'm slowly getting in touch with my Samoan culture, and part of that was going to Samoa and living there for 2 years and working there. So, yeah, I'm on that journey of that multiple identity and trying to find out my Samoan side.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've heard you describe yourself in many different ways in these articles that I've read about you. I listened to your podcast, which we will get into. But I want to go back to high school. I'm from West Auckland. What's up, West Auckland? Yeah, give it up, give it up.
Yeah.
But, high school, when you think about your journey coming through high school, because I've heard you say that you weren't strong in science. Like, when did you realize that science was your passion? Like, coming through high school, you were doing many different activities, obviously in music as well. I know that you play the violin. But when did you actually say to yourself, hey, this science is for me, it's something I'm passionate about?
Yeah, well, definitely not in high school because I really struggled with the biological science and chemistry. I remember in chemistry there was a group of us, and I think we named ourselves like the Drowners or something because we were just struggling through chemistry. And I didn't take physics in my last year of high school. So yeah, science was not my passion during high school. I think it was when I went to university and did science, and I did that because a lot of my friends were doing it. And I think it was also that complex of science associated with being doctors. Doctors has that hierarchy. So I think there was that thing in my mind. And so I thought, well, if I do science, it's more likely to get me a better job, supposedly. I didn't really know at the time. But anyway, I did science at university, and it was really most should be the end of my first year at university that I thought, wow, that's, science could be my thing. Science could be something that I'm really passionate about. And I think it was interactions with papers that I really liked and subjects that I liked. So for me, that was plant papers. So it was, just understanding how plants grow, physically seeing them. But then I was also talking about, like internally the micro it's not really microorganisms, but like how the microbiology of how plants work internally and all the systems in there that got me really interested and passionate, because I thought, man, like I didn't even know that happened in plants. It's so complicated and intricate, and you can't see it with your eyes, you know. So that was real. That's what really got me in my into science.
So interesting. You mentioned at the beginning in your introduction that you were adopted into, a Palangi family, and you had your mom and your gran. I've seen pictures of your gran. It's so cute on Instagram. But you described on your podcast in an episode. I don't know if it was episode 1 or 2. You talked about how your friends labeled you an Oreo because you were brown on the outside, but they said that you speak like a white person, and I something I found really interesting is that you said I didn't see color. Um, yeah, can you speak about that? Because I was just like, yo, I understood what you were saying, like I could see why like you were saying that, and I thought, man, that's so interesting. I gotta ask her.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because during high school and even primary school, I didn't see, like, even in primary school, I didn't really identify as Samoan. I was just like Amy, and I had my friends. And like, I think about it now as well. Like, I had a friend who was Tongan, but like, I didn't really know what that meant, you know? And so that carried on to high school, where I predominantly, I only had white friends because I felt comfortable to be around them. There were Islander girls. I went to an all girls school. There were Islander girls there, but I just felt like I couldn't relate to them, or even like, just I don't know, like what would I talk about? I actually felt uncomfortable to be around. It's so weird saying that, but people like myself. So yeah, it wasn't. And still in high school, I thought, oh yeah, my name is Amy and I'm Samoan, and that was it. So like, I didn't really see color that way. I didn't really notice that there was a divide in like who I was hanging out with my friends. And like, I would only make the observation that, oh, a lot of my friends are white, and then that would be it. And then I would just carry on with my life. But yeah, definitely comments of like Oreo, and I didn't find that offensive. I don't know if that is offensive, to some people, but at the time I was like, yeah, that's how I identify, white on the inside and brown on the outside. And so yeah, definitely during primary school, high school, it wasn't like a big deal. And it's really interesting because our school didn't really celebrate our cultures that much. I mean, they had like cultural days where, different performances will happen. But now the school, St. Mary's College, I went back there just to speak at the prize giving, and it's so different now. Like there's a lot more cultural engagement and like people being proud to talk about their culture. Yeah.
That's interesting. So I keep mentioning your podcast. Are you still recording episodes for your podcast, or is that something that you've just put on the put on the side for a while you? Is that still a project of yours?
Yeah, so I have been, that is on the back burner of my podcast, but I do have 2 interviews that I did long, long time ago. And thankfully, Nick Moyono, who's an engineer in Samoa, he has said, yes, you're right to go and publish that, even though it was ages ago. So I'm currently editing that episode, and it'll be up on YouTube. But yeah, I am still slowly chipping away at the Samoan Scientist podcast.
I love it, eh? I love it. I was listening to it, and I like how you say, you want people to you want you want tangible and practical things that your listeners or whoever's listening, the audience, whether they're just like happen to come upon your podcast or they're interested in science, things that they can take away and apply to their lives. I love how you do a lot of reflection on it, talking about values and morals. But of course, I'm definitely not a science person, but it doesn't matter because when I listen to it, there are things that you speak of that it resonates with me, not so much the science, but just those life experiences. So I do hope that you continue that journey with the podcast because I it's so raw and I like you. Seriously, please continue with your podcast. I'm enjoying it. Um,
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you took that away because, yeah, I also feel the same. We all go through the challenges, and it's not like, scientists are up here, we are actually people, and it creates that relatability. Like, oh,
right.
yeah, like I feel like that sometimes, or I experience that in my job. Yeah, so I'm glad that's what you got out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't actually remember how we connected on Instagram, but there's this thing I read where you talk about this idea of scientists like white men in white lab coats that that I was reading it going, that's exactly what I think when I think scientists. They like lock themselves away, they got some crazy hair going on and they're doing these like secret experiments, and then I see someone like yourself who is just it's so different. It's great that you have a platform, you're using your Samoan Scientist platform. I guess just to bring because I saw that you do this series, Samoa, was it
Talanoa scientists.
Talanoa scientists, and I saw that there were people from all over the world that were tuning into that, and it's such a powerful platform to have to be able to bring in, so many different people. And then I didn't even realize that we had a lot of Maori and Pasifika. Just to see the range of guests that you're bringing on, indigenous scientists. I mean, yeah, Talanoa with scientists. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So I've been on social media for Samoan Scientist for quite a long time. It feels like a long time since my master's, so 2015. And I really enjoyed the interaction with people on there, online, virtually. But I always have wanted to do something with the community because I feel like, there's so much power in just going out, seeing the faces of the community and chatting with them and really giving back because that's my overall aim as Samoan Scientist. But I felt that I was only doing it virtually. So that's when Talanoa with Scientists came about. And it's a scary thing to do because, if you've ever got a dream or like a big goal, it's really hard to pursue it because you're like, oh man, like, is anyone going to show up? Is it going to fail? Like, am I just going to be like have stage fright? So there's all those thoughts going through my head. But I was thankful enough to apply for some funding through Ministry for Pacific Peoples. So a big shout out to our government and for them to creating that funding pool to give us those opportunities from the community for the community. So I applied for a grant and got it. And so Talanoa Scientists was about bringing the modern Pacific scientists that I knew of in Auckland, and there are many more, to the community and saying, here they are, they're really amazing. They are leaders in their field and have a chat with them. You can ask them anything. You can ask them, how much how much do you get paid? Do you have any opportunities for me? And I just really wanted to show everyone like we are here because I feel like in science, we're sometimes very comfortable in our space with the people that we're familiar with. And it's to me, it's like, no, it's not about that. It's about sharing us with everyone and helping those up the ladder or through the door and just giving back to those who want to come through. So Talanoa with Scientists was online, so that was with Zoom, and then we had one in-person session where people from the Auckland area could come and chat with the scientists. Yeah.
Man, it's such an awesome like initiative, and even for someone like myself who doesn't know much about science, I've listened to some of the speakers, and I just think, on in your highlights, and I think, wow, it's the human side, scientists, we have these preconceived notions of the kind of people who are scientists, and then to see brown people, to see our people just speaking of their journeys and experiences in that field. It's such a different space for me to kind of be in. So I also love how you interact regularly with these study sessions and things through your page. Like I think I mean, it's great, sis. Like how does it make you feel when you're able to connect with young people, even just online? Some who may not be able you may not be able to see in person. Like what's that like for you?
What I've noticed is that when people interact with me online, they will actually be in the science industry and they'll be Samoan, but they'll feel really isolated and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I found you. It's really only me in the science industry, talking generally, but yeah, and they're always happy to see another brown person out there. So for me, it's really encouraging to get those messages because it confirms to me that, we're not alone, even though there are a few of us around. And it also creates that network and support because there's so much, I believe there's so much strength in numbers, and especially in universities, it's quite can be quite a hostile environment. So I guess I'm talking from that perspective because that's my
Hostile.
experience.
I'm nervous now. Do you need to elaborate, sis? Go ahead. I'm like, what is going on?
Well, I guess this is just recently, but some of you may have heard of an article, well, a letter to the editor that was published in The Listener. And so the letter to the editor was about an article, and it was about incorporating Mātauranga Māori science in the school curriculum. So Mātauranga Māori science is basically Māori's Indigenous science. So it could be planting by the moon, which is called maramataka, different fishing techniques. And so that is actually science. But what the letter to the editor, these people had sent in, they said Mātauranga Māori is not science. And so it was just saying that this Indigenous knowledge should not be incorporated into the school curriculum. And they actually signed their names, and a lot of them were from the University of Auckland. And so there was a lot of,
Scandalous.
especially from our area, like a lot of backlash about that. There's a TV show called Hui on New Zealand, so they talked about that as well. And so it's for people to write that, it's not surprising, but it just brings up, hurt again, because it's like, oh, that's right. There are people who disagree with, our Indigenous sciences and the fact that they are in prestigious positions at the university is really... it does make you feel unsafe because some people in those departments are Māori, and they work in Mātauranga Māori spaces. So that's what I mean by, got to watch your back sometimes, and you've got to have that support behind you. But there has been a lot of people who say that, that they don't agree with those statements. And some of those, there's been a big letter that people have signed as well saying that they don't agree with those views. But yeah, that's what I'm finding. Universities are a bit hostile, sometimes a bit unsafe for us Indigenous people, but there are some Pacific people in the university who are strong and know how to deal with those people. But yeah, I think you'll find that wherever you go in any science industry, it's really good to have support.
Wow. Wow. That's scary.
Yeah.
You live on a farm? Because I can hear a rooster.
Yeah. So we've got like a little what is it? Like a little bit of land out there. So we've got lots of chickens, roosters, got my 2 horses and my mum's 2 little miniature ponies. So yeah.
I feel like I was sitting here listening and I was like, yo, I feel like I'm in Samoa. With that darn rooster that's crowing early in the morning to wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Do you ride horses?
I did a long time ago when I was in high school. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. So you mentioned Samoa. You lived there for 2 years. Was that your first time because you were over there, was it your master's, right? You were doing your master's research. Was that the first time you had gone to Samoa or you had been before?
I'd been to Samoa maybe 2 years prior to that, and that was the first time that I went was for a family function. And I think I was very naive because I thought, oh, it'd be like New Zealand. But when I got off the plane,
Sis, come on.
When I got off the plane, I was like, oh my gosh, these houses with no walls.
Yeah,
Like, and I would use that language as well. I'm like, oh my gosh, like people just playing volleyball out the front of their house. And I was just like, man, I was just blown away. I was like, this is so cool. I loved it. And then that was like my first time we stayed at one of our family's places. It was near the airport, so it wasn't near town. So like even just seeing the umo, how that was prepared, like I loved that. And I remember we'd just go across the road and swim. They had like a swimming hole at the back, and I just thought that was just paradise. That was so amazing to me, and I loved that. I fell in love with that. And so I guess during my master's, so I did my master's here at Auckland, and I've always wanted to go to Samoa and live there, but also work there. So then that's when I applied to SROS, Scientific Research Organisation of Samoa. And that's when I went over and worked on a project similar to my master's. And that was looking at exporting fresh taro from Samoa to Australia. So in Samoa, they had the taro leaf blight disease, and it wiped out all of the taro crops in 1993. So there are no original Samoan cultivars from before 1993, which is really sad because to me, like, that's like taonga. That's like what our ancestors ate and our connection to our ancestors. But nowadays we have the new taro that's a cross between Fijian taro and Niuean taro, and it's resistant to the taro leaf blight disease, or somewhat resistant. And so Australia said, well, we don't want your taro leaf blight disease because we don't want it coming over to Australia and killing all of our potential crops. So as scientists at SROS, we had to see whether or not that taro leaf blight will survive on the taro when it's shipped from Samoa to Australia. So we did lots of work in the lab, going out into the field and collecting taro and infecting it with the taro leaf blight disease. So that took about 2 years to do all of that work and do the reporting on that.
And then in terms of language and connecting with the culture, were you living like church, doing the church, going to church every Sunday? Were you like, how did living in Samoa help you in terms of like, because you're immersed in the language, were you able to speak it? Do you know what I mean? On the regular, what was that like, the cultural and language experience?
So before going over, I did an introduction Samoan class over here. So that helped a lot. But when I went over, that like, it was good, but it wasn't really enough. But what I really loved is that in the workplace, everyone would speak Samoan and everyone was Samoan. And so that's so refreshing. Like you'd never get that here, or not in science. So it was so cool to work with Samoan scientists who would just speak Samoan in the lab, and they would talk Samoan to me and like encourage me to learn, which really helped. And so I picked up on just a few words, like just mainly food words, but I could kind of put sentences,
stuff, right? The important stuff. Come on.
But I could kind of put sentences together, just hearing key words.
Yeah.
But it helped. Yeah, it helped so much, the language. But I'm still not fluent in it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. In terms of STEM, and you mentioned, the Samoan scientists. Do they have resources? Do they have a lot of resources available to them? Is STEM huge over there? Do you know, like, what are their facilities and resources like for you coming from Auckland? What did you see in terms of that part of their job?
Yeah, so from my understanding, SROS is the only scientific research centre. So they do a lot of water quality testing. They also make products. So we made some Tara whiskey a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Tell us
and
more.
also, yeah. I think they're making some other alcoholic products as well. And they also do a lot of medicinal plants work. So finding if there could be possible like medicinal properties in them and possibly make them into pharmaceutical products. But in terms of their facilities, I was really impressed because it was quite interesting because Samoa's really good in some ways where it's Ross, they'd get things done really quickly and they have a lab set up very similar to in New Zealand. And then outside of the SROS, it's quite like slow moving. But I was really impressed with the SROS, because when I was there, they basically had a big lab created, had a lot of new equipment as well. And from my understanding, I think they're still expanding the lab space. Last time I was there, they were going to do possibly some cancer research work. And so you need really, I guess, safe lab spaces that you can do accurate work in, and you need a lot of equipment. So they're really well equipped, but I mean, they always need a lot of funding from other places because it's not readily available compared to here. But very impressed with their lab spaces when I was there.
Do you think you would want to go back, perhaps after you've finished your PhD studies, and live there and work there, or maybe do some more research in that area? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my PhD project was actually set for in Samoa, but that was pre-COVID. So now I can't do that, but maybe if I'm still waiting for my PhD, I could do that later on. But definitely, like I've always wanted to maintain that connection with Samoa. But the closest that I can do is just help our Samoan communities here at the moment.
Right. I read in this article, you say in this article that I read, as I learn more about myself, I see that my passion lies in encouraging Pasifika to pursue science. I've realized that within society, inequality, racism, and injustice is alive and well. We only have to look in our backyard where Pasifika are stereotyped as thieves, drunks, dole bludgers, and are only cherished when representing New Zealand. Um, it's powerful. I mean, I've also, like thoughts on that. Do you see that? I mean, I've lived over here. I've lived in Japan for 6 years now. Um, as space is changing. I mean, you've talked about science, obviously, and in science spaces, but in general, do you see, in terms of community spaces, are people, acknowledging our Pasifika more in other spaces, our Maori and Pasifika people in other spaces, or do you think it's still very Eurocentric in terms of policies and things like that and access to resources? Are you able to speak on that?
Yeah, I think generally it's pretty much the same overall. I was just thinking when I had the Talanoa Scientists, I had some teachers come, which was really encouraging to see. They took time out of their work, which is a lot when you're a teacher. And they said we actually don't know of any Māori Pacific scientists until they came to that workshop. And so they said, kids still don't know what jobs are out there. And another example is I was talking with a university student who's currently doing her postgraduate work, and she's doing a lot of work with Māori Pacific at the University of Auckland. And she said to me, we're still seeing the same thing. No one knows the pathways into science, in particular research. We are still seeing students drop out, unfortunately, as they progress with their studies. So I guess in that sense, of people not knowing about science as a possible career path and even knowing about people in those industries is still the same. And I think that perception of us Pacifica as being good at sports is still the same.
Right.
Um, I don't know if it's because I've met more people in my journey, but I feel like the perception um, of getting Māori Pacific into science is a lot stronger because it's coming from the top. So the government is really pushing Māori Pacific into sciences because they see that in the universities, in the research centres, that there is just a lack of us. I think there was like random, 1%, 1 to 3% of us that identify as Māori Pacifica who are in the science industries. And so the government sees that as a problem. Now, what have they done? They may have done a lot, but as a student, as a PhD student at University of Auckland, I haven't really seen too much, apart from scholarships. But that's more at the lower level, right? What about the people getting them into management jobs, leadership roles? Because unfortunately, that's where the change happens. It happens at the top. Us as students, and also people who are postdocs, they've done a lot of their work. Now they're kind of like a senior scientist. They can only do so much. We can only do so much. But overall, it's pretty much stayed the same. So I think, will that change over time? I don't know, because it's really disheartening seeing senior academics saying those disgusting things about Mātauranga Māori, and they're kind of, gatekeeping that space. So where do we go? Where's our space?
Is there a collective of you that I mean, yeah, what do you do in those situations? Like how can we bring about change in those spaces, right? Is there a collective of you um working man, I'm just listening thinking how do you even breach those spaces when you do have those gatekeepers, when you do have those dominant voices that maybe they do want to get, I'm thinking they probably have that checkbox where they have the one random brown person in there. How do you change those spaces if there's government funding being provided, there's scholarships, but then there's this big divide? Like, how do you even breach those spaces? What do you see needs to happen? You know?
From my experience, a lot of those people who are gatekeepers are in the universities. And so a lot of our Māori Pacific researchers have gone out of the universities, which is really, really, really disheartening because that's where a lot of our people come through, our students. And if they don't see us in the spaces, well, then where's that relatability? They may not think they're welcomed in those spaces.
Right.
So a lot of people have left the universities and they are thriving in their own research centres across New Zealand. I don't know. It's so complex. I know that there are a group of us Pacific researchers, and we're only students, PhD students, who are supporting one another through our studies because that's first and foremost for us. But also we're aware of what is happening if we want to get further up with our studies. I know from Minister Peter Williams, he's the Minister for Pacific Peoples.
Oh, yes, yes.
He is really pushing for Pacific in the workforce, and in particular science in the workforce. So I feel like if that's coming from him, that's government. So there should be some things put in place. But again, I don't know what we can do, really. I guess, yeah.
Yeah, because then if you, I mean, I'm just wondering about kids at school. Kids in secondary school. Like, what are they getting? What are they learning about STEM? What access do they have other than general university entry kind of information, right? But are there support groups and programs in place there so that they can see those pathways, as you've already mentioned, like, yeah, what do you say to students what advice, when you think about your journey so far, coming through, like what advice do you speak on when you go to visit these schools and present and give talks about your area of studies about sciences? What do you say to kids to get them hooked and interested and pursuing um, a pathway in science?
Yeah, I guess I always kind of go in and just from my experience saying, it's okay to not know what you want to do. Because I had that perception from my schooling that in year 11, you have to choose all the subjects that you want to do, and that'll determine what job you're going to study for, and that's going to be the job for the rest of your life. So that was my way of thinking, and I just really wanted to tell them, it's not like that. It's not a straight path to your career. It's about finding what you're interested in, and that could mean choosing a range of subjects in your first year of university. It could mean taking a year off to try out different types of jobs. You could do retail work. I don't know, you could do some dock work. It's really about finding what you're passionate about, and that could be many alternative pathways. And then once you find that passion that you really, really love, then it's just about networking and making those support groups. Because I found from my experience, I went through the Tuakana program, which is a Māori Pacific program at the University of Auckland to help Māori Pacific students with their academic work. And for me, that provided the academic support, the pastoral support, and also the social side, so it's really helpful to have that support when you're going into any space, but definitely in science. You need that support because we're a minority. Yeah.
Right. I really like. So I wanna just going back and forth in terms of your journey, but I like the episode where you're talking about I'm not dumb. We talk about that I'm not dumb, and because I watched this, just that whole like stereotype, the dumb coconut, um, that, you know, tell us a little bit about that, just for our audience, the whole
Yeah.
thinking behind that, because it's a mindset thing, right? It's
I think now I'm thinking about it now because it's come up recently because of what's been happening recently.
right.
But it's also, I guess you could label it for myself like as imposter syndrome.
Mm,
So for me, initially in high school, I thought, if I ask a question, I'm dumb because everyone knows what's going on. Everyone knows what the teacher is talking about. And I saw asking a question as a weakness. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to ask questions. But next minute, fail my exams.
right.
So ask your questions, please, because
Yeah.
that is not a sign of you being dumb. And I guess that morphed as I went throughout university to imposter syndrome.
Mm,
So even during my masters, like I would feel really just like angry at myself for doing experiments and not getting the results that I needed. And I'd get really frustrated with myself because I'll be, yeah, doing everything that my supervisors told me to do, but it was not working out. But then little did I know that was part of science. But still, there was that I'm dumb in the back of my mind. And I guess now I've been, well, a year ago I applied for a PhD program. And to get into the PhD program, you need a B plus in your master's, which is 1 year of research. But I got a B minus in my master's. So again, that idea of I am dumb comes up because the university puts these things in place, and it classifies you as whether or not you can do a PhD. You're smart enough, or whether you're not smart enough, you cannot do a PhD.
right.
And so I've been really, that idea of I am dumb, imposter syndrome is, yeah, it's always on my mind. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because what I said like a long time ago, is it because Samoan and people don't take us seriously, or is it because, I don't know, university puts up these Western systems that we just can't relate to, or they have, assess your smartness through exams, which are very Western. It's very frustrating that as Indigenous people, we have to meet the Western systems needs in order to get what we think is successful, which
Right.
in reality, is it success? I don't know. Being a scientist, is that successful? Yes, but what about, being a really good person in your community and giving back? So yeah, that whole idea of I am dumb, imposter syndrome is just like never ending, I think. But from from following other scientists online, it's very common in our spaces, and I don't know if that's because of how the science industry is set up. It's really to knock you down all the time, or what it is. But yeah, it's quite common,
Yeah, I mean
unfortunately.
the reason I bring it up is because it resonated with me. I'm not a scientist. I'm a as an educator. So when I listened to that, and then I had read about it, you speaking on that, and I thought, you know what, like honestly, that resonates with me so much because even being in spaces like as an educator, when you're in spaces with senior colleagues, in spaces of authority, it's always it's like doubt. Um, it's also I've tried to explain this to some of my colleagues here, like you know, I think it's a cultural thing as well. People don't understand. Like if you're, I think they don't understand the whole like got to be humble. You got to listen. Like listen to not ask questions because the teacher is right all the time. You don't question that, right? And when our parents they come from the islands to New Zealand, and then they are in the workforce, and it's that whole system. You listen to the person in charge, which is usually someone of the dominant culture. Like I think it's this cultural thing, and it's changing. I think that more of us are beginning to be like, let's amplify Pasifika voices, let's amplify Indigenous voices, which is super important. But like you said, like I think in the back of my mind, I always have to stop and think: is the space that if I'm in a meeting, if I'm at a course for professional development, anything like that, I always have to check myself: is this a safe space? Am I sharing too much? Are people looking at me like, shut up, man? We don't want to hear your story. They talk about teachers of color, people of color sharing stories, and I think it's just deeply embedded in us. It's this cultural thing where we do have to check ourselves in these spaces. Is it a safe space? And I just, yeah, like it just when I heard you speak on that, it just it resonated with me, and I'm not even in the sciences. I'm not even like, but it's that self doubt. It's we talk about mindsets, and it's that you do want to speak, you do want to challenge, but it's are they judging you? Are they like you don't even know what you're talking about? It's all that. It's a real thing, sis. It's real. Like, and I really liked how one of your I can't remember her name. One of your scientists, indigenous scientists, one of the speakers, I can't remember her name, but she spoke about, you know, ask questions when you're in these spaces. You have every right to be there. You speak, ask questions, and I was like, "Yo, man, that kind of thing. It makes me nervous. It makes me super nervous." Even as a teacher, I try to explain to my colleagues, and they have no understanding. They're like, "You're an adult. You should just speak your mind," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. You gotta wait. You gotta listen. You gotta process. Figure out if it's a space that is safe, that people are not gonna throw you under the bus. it's it's very real, sis. It's not the I mean, yes, that I'm dumb, but am I worthy to be in the space to speak against people who just seem so authoritative and they know it all? You know what I mean? I'm rambling, but I just wanted to say that's why I asked this because it resonated what you were saying, what you're speaking on.
You made a good point about safe spaces as well. I didn't think about that. Yeah, it definitely helps to know the room
Mm.
because, yeah, it could be taken in the wrong way as well. Um, yeah.
And I think, when I think about, how are our students, how are students hearing about these science pathways? Are there spaces, are there programs available to them? And then who are the people presenting these options to them? Because that as well, that trust and the safe space, it's a thing, sis. How who is delivering the information? Is it someone who is in a position of power as a teacher who is not kind of like coming down to the level? Not saying dumb it down, that's not what I'm saying, but really that real conversation, that one on one with the student and saying, hey, look, actually, here are your options. Maybe university is not your option now. Maybe it is taking a year off. Maybe it is going to tech. Like all those things matter when and whether it's going into education or, into STEM, whether it's um, whatever career path, I think that in school, those are things that make a huge difference. Um, because then from there, if students, if they do continue on the pathway to university, then they're going in with a better, just at least some confidence, or at least some form of comfort, knowing, okay, I've been given the support during school. Now I'm going to take this Bachelor of Science, and there's a support crew there. Do you know what I mean? I think it's something that filters right through. Um, it has to be people in positions of power, that the youth, people like yourself, that can really engage with our young people so that they hear your story and they're inspired. They see role models, representation and role modeling, the things that I see you doing on our social media, with your Talanoa program, I mean, all of that, sis, that is representation and role modeling at its finest. Like, you know, all these young students wanting to do science, they need more people like you out there engaging with them in schools so that they can think, oh, okay, so it's not necessarily like, oh, there's my teacher, but oh, there's someone actually in that space. I know I'm rambling, but you're doing so much like great work. I would love, it'd be nice if I mean, there's a collective of you. I'm not saying you can save New Zealand, but it's just, it makes all the difference. You being able to share your story, and that could really inspire. It's planting those seeds in the minds of our young people, or just students in general. Obviously we focus on Maori and Pasifika, but you could really say something. You could say something that resonates with a young child, and years later they remember.
When I was at school, so I graduated in 2010, and I was just thinking, like, my careers advisor was terrible. Like, don't listen to your careers advisor at school. But I think the beauty of now is that if we have more people online, you can get the answers just through a DM or a message. And that was part of Samoan Scientists, by being accessible to students and them asking, what is it really like? Like, are there jobs out there for me? What do you do day to day? And so I think it's really important, like you said, to get that collective. Some people are not comfortable online, but that's all good. But just having those key people that can connect the students to other people. So yeah, sometimes I have people who are not interested in biological sciences. They do like more geography, but I can connect them with people in those areas. And so yeah, social media, there are a lot of negative things about social media, but I'm a big advocate of creating content and creating knowledge for people that helps them, feeds their mind, and not just like another pretty picture.
Right. Well, you've described yourself as a resilient person, and just this whole trying to, trying to stay positive. Um, with all the work that you do around sciences, your research, and you know, reaching out to people from all over, on the web. How do you look after yourself? Like
Mm.
how do you um, how do you find time to just be like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna relax a bit here. Like, do you make time for that, for just self care, for like just even if it's just relaxing for a bit, and not even having to um just have discussions about the things, science and how passionate you are. Like, how do you look after yourself? Because that's important.
That's a good question. So I would say I don't really look after myself. I guess there's two things that I think about when you say self care. Like, I think of, like you said, just relaxing and having time to just do nothing. So I guess, yes, in that sense, I do make time. And I've had a lot of time recently because I'm getting played by the university, but yeah. But then also, more recently, I guess, like, I don't know what you call it, but self development, mental awareness. This is something that I'm new to, and this was kind of reinvigorated by an event that it was a retreat that I went to for Pacific women. And we went away to Waiheke Island, which is, you take a ferry boat ride from Auckland. And we just went away for the weekend and just talked about anything and everything. And I didn't know any of these wahine. Some of them knew each other, but it was so powerful to be in a room, and it wasn't awkward at all. And like, I'm an introvert, and I'm like, oh my god, what are we going to talk about? But it was so empowering. Like, they're from all different disciplines. Everyone was just, it was so exciting to have meaningful conversations. And we also went as deep, to talk about our own challenges and to talk about our own emotions. And for me, I'm like, oh my god, like, I never talk about emotions. Like, bottle them up, yep, all good, that's fine. Like, I'm that type of person. And so it was really empowering to have, again, that safe space, and again, that support of women, Pacific women, to talk about those issues. And after that retreat, that weekend, it just opened my mind up to so many things that I wanted to, talk about, like my mental health, my mental well-being, and to really dive deep about, why do I do the things the way that I do. And so I guess that's part of the self-care and mental journey that I'm not so much, I haven't really developed on, but I really, really want to. And I think definitely in spaces when you are always questioned, sometimes, when you talk about Indigenous science, that is personal. That's your ancestors that they're talking about. So yes, it's really important to take care of yourself, especially in those hostile environments. And so what I've, because getting a therapist, or I don't know the proper term, but getting someone to talk to is really expensive. So I actually resorted to just writing down feelings. Um, I don't know, I found this somewhere online, but it's where you just write for a minute, and you just write about anything, like the first thing that comes into your head, and you just keep writing. And it puts all your emotions and thoughts onto the piece of paper, and I found that really helps. So just writing and journaling, which I've been trying to do, has kind of helped um my me time and taking care of myself.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna try that. I'm listening to a lot of the things that you're sharing, and I'm like, man, that resonates with me like so much. Um, as a teacher, and I'm like, I'm gonna try that 1 minute writing thing, like.
Mm.
But yeah, looking after yourself, because I know that you do so much for people around you, and just the online community. So I came across the weaving. Which I just thought, what? Okay, I see you. I see what you're doing. I was just like, what? Okay, she weaves as well. Come on. And then the Instagram account that you have with your mom, Living Off the Land. Tell us about your weaving journey because, man, that does not look easy. Like I saw from start to right now, and I was just like, man, talk about perseverance. I would have given up, man. I would have given up after probably the first 2 days or something. Like,
So I took up weaving when it was lockdown in New Zealand. I've always wanted to weave, especially, big fellas in Samoa, like they're so beautiful. But I could only find, and it's really hard to find traditional weavers that are going to teach you. And I don't have any family members that I know of who could teach me that. So a friend recommended online course that by a Māori weaver. It's called Hetet, Hetet, weaving online, and you can just sign up for those courses. And so I started doing that. And at that time, I was looking after my nana, she was like 88 at the time. And she's just getting old, so she forgets a lot and she can't cook for herself. So during the lockdown, I was looking after Nana and doing all the animals. And so it's quite stressful because my mum was in town and she didn't want to come and cross-contaminate with Nana just in case she would get sick. So the weaving really was my saving grace. I don't know what it is, but it's about harvesting the hara keke and like feeling it in between your fingers and then smelling it as well. I don't know. And like when I start weaving, it's really hard to start off with. I was really frustrated at the beginning, but once you get it, it's like so addictive. So like, for instance, this is behind me there. I wove that, not that up there. That's another artist that wove that, but like that type of kete, I would just start weaving and wouldn't stop until I finished it. It's so relaxing. You get lost in it, and it's that connection, I think, with the land. Like, I don't know, it's just something about feeling it in between your fingers. I don't know, it just really got me. And so I really want to pick up weaving again because I've had a bit of a break, and it's just so relaxing and it's so satisfying to me.
it sounds therapeutic, right? It sounds very therapeutic. Just hearing you talk about it. And so, with this page that you have with your mom, which I will link in the bio so people can check out because there's some really cool things on there. So it's a health and well-being page. Did that come about because you were doing all the with the weaving projects? Is that how the page came together with mom?
It kind of started before that. So we moved out to Kimu, which is kind of at the time was a rural area, about 12 years ago. And we were originally in town. And so we've always loved animals and we always loved being outdoors. And so over that time, we thought, it'd be really nice to share that with people and to give people tips as well in terms of like planting and using the things around you, because mum loves an organic collection where people put things like on the side of the road. Like she'll go around searching for things and just picking up things on the side of the road and using them for multiple things around the house. So we've always been about that life. And I think with COVID, it just really amplified it because it showed how much we depend on supermarkets, and it's really scary to think of that, the food runs out, which they said it won't, but that what to do and how to survive by living off the land. So it really came out of COVID and also us just loving being outdoors and having a bit of land and being outside.
Do you have any book recommendations or a book recommendation?
Yes. Oh, I don't have it here.
That's okay.
But I went to university with an amazing guy called Vennel, really down to earth, really cool. And he created a website called The Meaning of Trees, where he would go out walking in the bush and he would kind of taste test what plants he could eat safely, though, not just guesswork. But a lot of those trees some of them were indigenous. Maori used to use them way back then. And so he was approached to create a book from that website. So it's called The Meaning of Trees by Robert Vennel. And it's got basically how Maori used to traditionally use the trees, what it looked like, and what it's commonly used for today. And so I love that book because it's that combination of indigenous knowledge, looking at the trees around us and be like, oh my gosh, like there's this one tree called, I think the English name is like the Bushman's toilet paper. And so people used to use it out in the bush. You can use it now if you're out in the bush and desperate. But yeah, people used to use that to wipe their bums. So like little facts like that is so cool. And I love the book, The Meaning of Trees by Robert Vennel. Really
Okay,
cool.
I'm definitely gonna look that up. So interesting. Where do you see yourself, Samoan Scientist? Where do you see yourself in, I don't know, 10 years time? Where do you see yourself?
10 years time, I'll be 38.
Hmm.
So by then, I would love to be a lecturer, or I'd love to be in a space that is able to be there for students who couldn't see a Pacific face in the industry. So that could be the science industry, research industry, and I'd love to be a really active member in the community and connecting our community with science and answering their questions and being that person for them at the table, whether it be in the science space or just being a representative for the community. Where else do I see myself? I feel like I want to have more land. That'd be really nice to have more animals in the one space. And I don't know. I guess, yeah, just being really happy with my achievements so far. Because I'm quite hard on myself. I'm like, no, that's not good enough. So I guess having achieved what I wanted to achieve by now, by 10 years time.
Oh, good. Are there any? I mean, obviously, with the pandemic and everything going on, in terms of research, and science, and being able to travel to, are there any like dream conferences that you want to attend, or a research center that you'd love to visit? Um, in terms of traveling and connecting with other indigenous scientists or scientists in general, do you have like a dream destination or research center or institute that you've always wanted to visit?
Not any that I know of, but I'm sure there's some out there. It's really about the people as well. So I guess whoever is, yeah, indigenous scientists. Well, I guess there are a few in Hawaii, which would be really nice to go and see. I had to see some people over in Hawaii, but definitely when you ask that question, I just sort of Samoa, like I just want to go back there and do research there and see what they're doing, and yeah, just really connect with them there. It's really interesting because a lot of scientists do go overseas to get that extra experience, which is good. But I don't know, it's really hard because for me, would feel so disconnected from being so far away from the Pacific in New Zealand. And I always feel like, you have to be home to know what the people want. You can't really go overseas and be like, oh, people need this and that, and you're all the way over there. There's, yeah, that's another thing of science, but definitely Samoa and possibly Hawaii I'd love to go to.
That is cool, man. So before we end our show, I usually ask, I like to ask our guests just to, share some words of wisdom or just some encouragement, maybe a quote if you want, just for our audience, maybe for our young people listening. But before I hand it over to you, Amy, thank you so much I have learned so much in this in this Talanoa. You are so inspirational. I'm really looking forward to just continuing to follow your journey as Samoan scientist, and just to kind of see, your work, the continued work in the community, Pasifika community, and in those spaces. Um, is it the rain again?
Yeah, the rain's back.
The rain's back. So I look forward to that. I wish you all the best in preparation for your PhD studies. It's just a real honor to have you on the show today, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming through, sis. I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Yeah, you're a really good interviewer and you've done your homework, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And you raised some really good topics and key points that we talked about today, so thank you so much. I guess I'm going to talk about what's happened recently. So I've really had a really hard time getting into the PhD program, where it's really come down to my grade in order to get accepted into the PhD program, even though I have worked overseas and have publications, so in science publications. So, and I've had to wait a year for them to tell me about that. And another additional 6 months of study. So I guess my advice and from that experience is to make sure you know what you want to do, because you will be tested, whether it's not getting into a program or whether it's people questioning your existence in that space. So making sure that you know what you want to do and finding that passion, and also being persistent and not giving up. I think maybe I may have been a bit foolish, like I should have been gone by now, but I just really wanted to do my PhD, but also to the university to say that I am Pasifika and that I'm here in science, and I'm really very passionate about answering our community's questions, because if you look around, there is none of us in the science space, and who is going to do that? A non-Pasifika person is going to tell us what to do. How dare they? No, not on my watch. So I'm really encourage you to be persistent and to be passionate about what you're doing, and then unfortunately some spaces fight for it, really fight for it, and that's how I'm feeling at the moment. I'm going to fight for my space to be in the PhD program at the University of Auckland. But if you have any questions, if you just want to chat about your journey or any troubles that you're going through and challenges, feel free to message me at Samoan Scientist, anywhere on social media. So thank you so much, Rosa.